Hey everyone! I've had a couple of questions about the 3D learning journey that I'm on, and so I thought I'd share my early thoughts on the subject. I started dedicating time to learning how to 3D model on the 12th of May, 2024. I'm making this video in early September, so it hasn't been very long, but I'm happy to share some thoughts for anyone else who is interested in learning how to make 3D assets for games like Skyrim. Before I get into any personal reflections, I want to remind you that social media sells lies. There is no quick win here. Despite all the how I learned to 3D model in a day, or a week, or a month, or whatever the current flavor is, this is not really the reality for most of us. Yes, there are exceptions. If you already have a background in 3D, or texturing, or other parts of the workflow, then you will probably move a lot faster. It also depends on the amount and quality of time that you spend practicing. And, certainly, it depends on your own natural aptitude, but please don't let the aptitude part get in your way. If you really want to learn how to do this, you can. But please do yourself a favor right off the bat and recognize that this is going to take time, a lot of time, and a lot of effort. You don't just learn a little 3D. From what I hear, a realistic expectation is that it will take a year or more before you can expect to turn out something of high enough quality to be interesting to game and mod developers. With that said, it is impossible to generalize. The journey will be longer for some people and shorter for others. So just be realistic about yourself and your own situation. I have to admit, as excited and motivated as I am about learning 3D modeling, I have not loved the beginning of this journey. For starters, I didn't really want to make donuts, or chairs, or anvils, or even a table, although I did have a lot of fun with that table. And I struggled so much on some days that I had to force myself to log into my computer and do the work. It has been hard, and every step of the workflow presents a significant and steep learning curve. Knowing that logging in to practice meant more struggling, and probably not as much fun, was very challenging. But I knew that the only way to the other side was through the quagmire. So I just kept slogging away. And I'd say I'm at the point of feeling on some days like I can really do this, and on other days feeling like I'm still totally incompetent. The name of the game here is resilience, dedication, and passion. I'll emphasize a few key learnings from me as I've been making this journey. First, you may love every moment of the journey, and that's great, and I envy you. But if you are more like me and you do not love the struggle, this is okay. There's so much to learn, and as a beginner, you will often have no idea what to do. And it's just not fun to get frustrated or even downright angry because you can't figure out how to do things. But this seems to be an unavoidable part of the journey, so don't be surprised if it happens to you. If, as you start to get better, you get no enjoyment whatsoever out of it, then perhaps it's time to rethink your goals. But don't give up on learning 3D modeling just because it's so difficult and frustrating at the beginning. Second, although you may not want to make donuts or chairs or anvils or whatever other tutorials you follow, these early lessons are critical. You must give them your full time and attention. Do not rush and do not skip ahead. At this point in your curriculum, it has nothing to do with what you are or are not making. It's all about building the foundational skills that you need to go forward. Third, as I already said, the struggle is real, but don't avoid it and don't let it defeat you. Things will get better. Every time you open up Blender or XNormal or Mixer or NifScope and work on something, you are learning. And on the flip side, every time you don't open them up, you are not. If you keep trying and you persevere through the challenges, you will hit a point where you can make something on your own. And that feels amazing. It won't be a car, or an entire landscape, or an 1880s Worth ball gown, but that first little vase or treasure chest or loaf of bread that you create all on your own will be unbelievably satisfying. I wrote out a long list of tips, and then I scrapped it all because it's mostly like learning any other skill. And others who have way more experience than me have already produced some great advice. I point you to two things in particular. This Reddit post by Batman, which says pretty much all the same things I was going to say, and this Blender Guru podcast, which offers some great advice for how to progress in the most efficient way. And Andrew has some other great podcasts, so I encourage you to check them all out. Links to both of these are in the description. Instead of giving you my own laundry list of tips, I will instead say this. Focus first on building a solid foundation and develop an understanding of the workflow. It doesn't matter what you ultimately want to make, some truths are universal when it comes to 3D modeling. Learn those first. And don't agonize over memorizing Blender shortcuts when you don't even know what a function is for. Shortcut keys are great, and you'll definitely want to learn them, but just let it come naturally as you become more and more familiar with the software. It's okay to use the menus or right-click or search for a function if you can't remember the shortcut keys at the beginning. The most important thing here is knowing that there is a function for whatever it is you're trying to do. I also encourage you to pay attention to your topology and learn the rules. It's good to know the rules first, so then later you will understand when and how to break them. To give you an idea of what your journey might look like, especially if you want to make game assets, let's talk a little about the workflow. If you've never done 3D modeling before, you may not be aware of how complex the entire process is. The actual modeling in Blender is only a small piece of it, and this is partly what makes this subject so difficult to learn. Each part of the workflow is complex, and you have to understand how to do all of the parts. Here is a rundown of what it takes to go from nothing to a game-ready asset. First, you create and optimize the 3D model. This includes creating the shape, adding detail to make a high poly version, and then retopologizing to create the low poly version that actually goes into the game. UV unwrapping and packing comes next, and this is how you create a 2D projection of the 3D mesh so that you can apply image textures on top. And it involves arranging the shapes in the correct and most efficient way on the 2D surface. We've got baking, which, no, it's not cookies, although you may be ready to stress eat a few dozen by the time you get to this step in your workflow. I don't want to get technical here, but you have to create texture maps, like a normal map, for example, by using the highly detailed model that you made to capture all that gorgeous detail on specific types of 2D images so they can be applied to your low poly model. The quality of these maps that you bake can make or break the asset in the game. Texturing is a very important step because your 3D model doesn't look like anything until you put some images on top of it. Creating the images that go on top is an art form all on its own. Your game probably isn't going to use generic 3D file formats like OBJ or FBX, and so you need to convert the model into the format that your own game uses. In Skyrim, for example, 3D models are in NIF files. So we have to convert the generic model to the game-specific model and create additional things to make it work properly, such as add collision to make it behave like a tangible object, adding animations or glow shaders or particle lights or smoke and so forth. I'll also throw rigging and skinning into this category, which are required for things that have to move, such as characters and outfits. And then lastly, you have to know how to add it to the game. Assuming you are interested in making assets for a game, you really need to understand how this works. Even if someone else is going to do this step for you, Your models will be better off if you know how it all comes together in the game environment. To add even more complexity, you can't do all the workflow steps in one software. You will probably need 5 or 6 or many more different applications, and you'll have to develop a solid understanding of how to use them all. As an example, the Skyrim asset workflow that I've used so far, which is based on using only freeware, requires 9 or 10 different programs to complete all of the steps. I don't want to belabor this video, so let me wrap things up here. This all may sound very overwhelming, but this is just one of those things where you have to take it one step at a time. If you really want to learn 3D, then do it. And I mean that literally. Just get your hands on the keyboard and do it every single day as much as possible. YouTube videos are great, and I do encourage you to watch them because you can learn a lot by seeing what other people do. But you aren't going to learn how to model things yourself by passively watching YouTube. So get those hands on the keyboard and start clicking. I do recommend starting with tutorials. How many you do is up to you. You can do only tutorials for as long as you want. But at some point, you have to take off those training wheels and ride the bike yourself. So I'd suggest you try to model something on your own as soon as you think you might be able to do it. But for the love of Pete, make sure you start small. Try a vase or a bowl or something like that, not a Ferrari. So that's my initial thoughts on the 3D modeling journey, and I hope this was useful in some way. I have posted a suggested list of videos in the description if you'd like to get started on your own 3D learning journey. You can do it if you are willing to put in the time and the energy to learn. And if you would like to learn how to 3D model for Skyrim, or do any other game-related disciplines like voice acting, quest writing, and so on, then come join us at the Arcane University. I'll put the link to that in the description. Thanks for watching, and good luck!